All right, so you know we like to go deep here, and today is no exception. We're going to unpack this presentation by Dr. Robert Malone.
Yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
It really makes you wonder, how vulnerable are we to these tactics of psychological warfare? I mean, is this the world we live in now?
Well, that's what we're going to try to unpack today. You know, the intersection of technology, economics, individual freedom.
Yeah, he really brings it all together. And it's fascinating, coming from a guy with a background in medicine and science, not your typical economist.
Right, but that's kind of the point he's making, isn't it? Economics isn't some abstract theory anymore. It's the core of how the world works.
Yeah, he's saying it sets the boundaries of what we're even allowed to talk about. And within that, we've got this whole other level of, what did he call it?
Fifth generation warfare, 5GW.
5GW. See, this is what I mean. Sounds like something out of a movie.
But it's the reality we're facing. And to understand it, we have to forget about traditional ideas of warfare. You know, tanks and troops.
Right.
This is about information, about psychology, about shaping narratives and perceptions to achieve strategic objectives.
So instead of bombs and bullets, it's all about bytes and
Biases.
biases, yeah.
And the thing is, these tactics were initially developed for overseas conflicts, against adversaries. But Malone is arguing they're now being deployed against domestic populations.
Wait, hold on. Against? You mean...
That's the unsettling implication, yes. And they have a powerful tool at their disposal, what Malone calls surveillance capitalism.
Okay, so let's break that down. Surveillance capitalism, what is it and what does it have to do with all of this?
Well, think about companies like Google and Facebook. They're built on collecting and selling data about our online behavior. Every click, every search, it's all tracked and analyzed.
Oh, I know, it's creepy. Like, just the other day, I was looking for some new hiking boots online, and then bam ads for hiking gear everywhere I go.
Exactly. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
That data is incredibly valuable because it allows them to predict our future actions, shape our perceptions, even influence our decisions.
It's like they're building a profile of who we are, what we want, even who we might become, and then selling that information.
Exactly. And that information can be used for anything from targeted advertising to swaying elections, you name it.
Okay, but how is this surveillance capitalism different from just, regular old capitalism? I mean, companies have always tried to understand their customers.
Malone's argument is that surveillance capitalism blurs the lines between what economist Murray Rothbard called economic means and political means of acquiring wealth.
Okay, back up. Economic means versus political means. Explain that.
Sure. Economic means involve voluntary exchange, like trading goods and services. I give you this, you give me that. Political means involve force or coercion, like, for example, taxation.
Got it. So where does surveillance capitalism fit in?
It occupies this gray area. On the surface, it looks like voluntary exchange. We use these free services, right? But the reality is we're paying with our data, which is then used to manipulate us for profit, often without our explicit knowledge or consent.
It's like a bait and switch. We think we're getting something for free, but we're actually giving up something far more valuable. Our privacy, our autonomy, maybe even our freedom of thought.
And the truly frightening part is how unaware most people are of all this. They're caught in this system, this matrix, and they don't even realize it.
So it's like, once we're plugged into this system, how do we even know what's real anymore?
Well, that's the danger, right? This information ecosystem. It's tough to separate fact from fiction, especially when everyone's got their own version of the truth.
And it's not just these tech companies either, is it? I mean, Malone talks about the mainstream media being part of this whole system too.
Oh, absolutely. Media outlets profiting from keeping us glued to the drama, even if it means sacrificing. Well, maybe accuracy isn't the priority. Think about those crazy headlines or the constant breaking news alerts.
Yeah, it's like they need us to be afraid or outraged or...
Hooked. They need us hooked.
Exactly. But how does this tie back to what we were talking about before with the whole psychological warfare thing?
So Malone argues that terms like misinformation or even disinformation, they're often used as weapons. It's about controlling the narrative.
He actually mentioned being labeled as, like, spreading misinformation himself, just because he was raising questions about vaccines.
Exactly. And that's what's so scary, right? Questioning things, having a different viewpoint. Suddenly you're the enemy. It's like something out of...
It's very 1984, if you ask me.
Right, totally. This chilling effect on free speech. It's bad for everyone.
It's like we're constantly being told what to think, what to believe, and if we step out of line...
You get canceled.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, if you disengage, you're in your own little bubble. But if you stay plugged in...
You risk being manipulated. It's a tough one. Malone suggests that maybe disconnecting, at least a bit, is an act of self-preservation, you know?
Okay, so like a digital detox.
Kind of. Being more mindful about what we consume, where we get our information.
So less doom scrolling, more.
Intentional exploration.
I like that. But it's got to go deeper than that, right?
Right. It's about questioning some fundamental assumptions, maybe, like our reliance on these centralized systems, a fiat currency, big tech. Malone thinks we need alternatives that are more resilient.
So it's not just changing our habits, it's about rethinking the whole system.
Exactly. Recognizing that we have a choice in how we participate. We can be passive or we can be active, engaged citizens demanding more transparency. It's not easy, but...
Yeah, it's not like we can just unplug from the whole thing. Life still has to, happen.
And that's the challenge Malone puts forward, right? If we accept that these forces are at play, what are we going to do about it? He doesn't have all the answers.
But he gave us some clues, at least, right?
Yeah, hints. He talks about these decentralized systems, alternative models, community-based, empowering individuals. He even says, and I quote, building our own new world order.
Okay, building our own, that's a whole other level. But I get what he's saying, right? If you don't like the direction things are going.
Build something better.
But where do you even start with something like that?
Awareness is the first step. Understanding these tactics, questioning what we see, and looking for those alternatives. That's how we become more resilient, more discerning.
It's a lot to take in, isn't it? I mean, this whole conversation, it feels kind of overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely a lot to unpack. But hey, at least we're talking about it, right? Awareness is key, like we were saying.
But then what? It's easy to feel powerless, Like, okay, so my data's being collected, my fears are being exploited, I still have to order groceries online, life goes on.
It's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
We benefit from these systems, but they can also be used against us. Look at social media.
Oh, yeah, those platforms. Malone did not hold back on those.
No, he didn't. Remember, he even called them weapons at one point, which, okay, I admit, sounded a bit dramatic.
At first, I was like, weapons. But then he explained that whole behavioral matrix thing, and it started to make sense.
Right, because it's not just about the data itself, it's how it's mapping our emotions, our connections, leading us down these rabbit holes of information.
And it's not hypothetical either. I mean, Malone talked about how HE was targeted just for expressing his views. Censored, attacked online.
Yeah, he's a prime example of how these tactics silence dissent, enforce conformity. Remember shadow banning? People don't even realize it's happening. Their voices are just gone.
It's like, who are these companies to decide what we see and hear? It's scary, honestly.
It is. It's why what we're doing here is so important. We have to be aware. We have to be critical consumers of information and look for alternatives to these big systems.
Okay, but what does that even look like, practically speaking?
Well, for one, diversify your information sources. Don't just rely on one or two platforms. Look for different perspectives, even if they make you uncomfortable.
So less scrolling, more like intentional searching.
Exactly. And watch out for that emotional manipulation.
Yeah.
If something makes you really angry or scared, take a second. Is it genuine concern or are you being played? And then support those decentralized systems, alternative social media, independent news. Every little bit helps.
So it's not about disengaging completely, it's about engaging differently, more consciously.
Exactly. Like Malone said, we might be in an information war, but that doesn't mean we've already lost. We can be more resilient, more discerning. We can choose that.
Starting this deep dive, I was a little apprehensive, honestly. It's heavy stuff, but I feel, more informed at least.
Me too. And honestly, that's the first step.
To doing something about it.
Exactly. Like Malone said, this is a call to awareness, a call to action. We have more power than we realize.
Couldn't agree more. Well said.
Thanks. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking those questions.
And never stop digging for the truth.